Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, November 12th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman of NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Got a nice little frog in my throat, too.
It's fall, you know?
Yeah.
It's cold outside now.
It is. And well, here's a personal story. The heat has been out of my house. Well, it's on now. It's been out for 6 days. We're all coughing and and all that.
I was going to say, we're Californians and it's like 66 degrees.
Yeah.
Oof, that's crazy.
But the motor of my heater, turns out the company that made it, Amana, a major corporation, doesn't make them anymore. And because of supply chain, there was only one they could find in the United States. And it took a week to get it here. So we're bundled up like Eskimos.
So you're suffering from the supply chain malaise like everybody
Yes,
else.
indeed. So please bear with me, folks. Okay, what's the big news? This Rivian. Wow.
Yeah, we were waiting for this one. This is another EV entry, Rivian, specifically trucks and off-road vehicles.
They're Illinois, right?
Well, they're all over the place, but they're headquartered down in Southern California.
Okay, but they started in Normal, Illinois.
They might have, yeah. I think their headquarters are in Irvine,
near the
Orange
university.
County. Yeah, and they've got that truck mentality. All their ads are like out in the wilderness and everything that you love.
They did the truck thing right.
It looks like it.
You and I were talking about that Tesla's truck just didn't strike you, or me especially, as a truck. It struck me as an interesting product, but not something you're going to, throw leaves in the back and go to the dump with.
Right.
This thing does. This looks like a real truck.
They did, and we talked also about the Ford E150 or F-150, whatever they're calling it.
F-150, yeah.
How that's a real truck that happens to be electric. And I bring up all these ads that Rivian is doing, marketing, to say this is what truck users have always done. The only difference, that environment that you're out in, you're a little kinder to it. You're not polluting it. You're not putting emissions out there because it's an EV.
Right.
And I think that's great. And if this whole EV movement is to catch on in the mainstream, it needs trucks that look like trucks that truck owners want to buy.
Where a rancher feels like he can throw a bale of hay or a shotgun, toss it in the back, and go to do what he has to do.
Right. And the nature of these EV companies, and we saw this with Tesla and we saw this with the smaller companies, is they go public and they make a lot of money without any product yet.
Well, there we are. It went public at 78, initially priced at 78, opened at 106.
Yeah.
Closed the day at 100. I think it's gone back down a little bit, but up 29% from its listing price.
I checked last night. It is the second most valuable truck company in the United States. Tesla's way up in the $1 trillion range.
Right.
But Rivian's already a $100 billion company after its stock
big
price.
As already GM and Ford.
Bigger than. And yet without any trucks in the wild, really. So I get it, because this was also why the 99.com boom went bust, because they never delivered on that IPO promise. But assuming Rivian can actually crank out some trucks, now it has a lot more money to do so.
It's got the cash to do it.
Yeah, and unlike Tesla, which famously has not put out any commercials, but relied on word of mouth, I think it's a different task for Rivian because it's off-road vehicles and trucks. They really need to reach out to the truck owners and say, here's a way to be powerful, to haul things, and to help the environment.
You want to see that commercial where it's covered with mud.
Yeah, I agree.
They raised $12 billion. Well, that's enough cash to build a lot of trucks.
It really is, and I think...
Do they have a factory yet? A full-blown assembly line?
They do, and they're actually putting trucks out there. I think they said they delivered just a minuscule number, but eventually, and hopefully very soon, we're going to start seeing these in the wild. And remember the early days with Tesla, when you started to see the Model S, and you were like, whoa, this is
What's that? Yeah.
Right, it's a legitimate looking sedan that I can see putting my kids and luggage in it.
There's a family in it. They're driving down 280.
Right.
It's got to be real.
Right. And then eventually with the far less expensive Model 3 to see that out there and say, people that have a regular old income can afford this too. And now, if we see that with the trucks, and it's not going to be the Cybertruck that's going to make people think, now we've gone off road with the EV. I think it's going to be the Rivian and then eventually the F-150. Let's get these guys out there because that's the word of mouth people need to see.
And we should celebrate R.J. Scaringe, the founder. I mean, he started it by himself 12 years ago, and now the company's got 9,500 employees. That's the American way of entrepreneurship,
Well, and
that was a
imagine
gutsy call by this guy.
Exactly.
And he pulled it off.
Exactly. To say we're going to build trucks and make them electric and try to convince people to get excited about that. Not too long ago, that seemed like a long shot.
Yeah. Well, he's following the path of Elon, not in the sense of just electric vehicles, but Elon said, I'm going to build a electric sports car that actually looks like a sports car and not a Timberland boot or yeah. And this guy's done the same thing. I'm going to build you a truck that looks like a Dodge Ram, Good for him. Okay. Elizabeth Holmes trial. I wasn't going to talk about this week. I told myself, no, we won't talk about it. But you're there. It's consuming your life still.
Well, I can wrap up this week.
Is this turning into your sentence? I mean, if Elizabeth Holmes doesn't do time, are you going to be resentful because you have done time on this case?
No. It's been an interesting story to cover, and I've really enjoyed it and have learned a lot. This week we can wrap it up. We heard from another VC type. Yeah. We heard from another lab director, and it seems like once again some of it seemed to go against her, some of it seemed to go in her favor. The big news, I think, was the very last thing said for this week by the prosecution, which said we're going to meet next week all 5 days.
Wow.
Which we haven't done yet. But prosecutor said, I'm predicting by the end of the week we'll have wrapped up the prosecution's case. So the state will be done.
Wow.
Which then leaves it in the hands of the defense.
Yeah.
And that's the big question mark, is who the defense will call, and most importantly, will they bring Elizabeth Holmes herself to the stand?
Do you think that she has enough advantage at this point that the defense just might rest and go to the jury?
It's hard to say. I doubt it just because, there's so much money involved and so much reputation involved.
Yeah.
You think the defense would come, loaded for bear as well. But let's remember.
That's a major defense technique.
I know. And
Our
the
client
defense
is so innocent, we don't need to defend her.
Right, we just need one that
Right.
doesn't feel the burden of guilt. And again, right, the defense doesn't have to prove anything.
No.
And so I don't know. The only thing about Elizabeth Holmes, given her past, is why wouldn't she testify? She's so good at convincing people of things that.
And you finally will get to hear her voice.
Well, that would be what I want, yes. But as far as what the defense
you want
wants,
that's your payoff for all of these weeks.
But what does the defense want? They want to convince this jury that she was maybe a little over her head, maybe didn't have enough time to get things right, but really had her heart in the right place.
She was working for the people out there.
That's what they want. And she has, in TED Talks and in national interviews, gotten that across very well to the point where people were willing to invest nearly $1 billion of their cash. So why couldn't she convince a jury, or at least one or two members of the jury, of that?
Yeah, and it seems to me that there's only been a few testimonies from people who are actually victims that would get the jury's sympathy. Bringing in billionaires and multimillionaires who blew some money, not going to get a lot of sympathy.
I agree, and
they were supposed to know better. They were supposed to do their due diligence.
Right, and I wonder if bringing those people, and remember, we didn't even see those people. We didn't see Rupert Murdoch or Betsy DeVos or Henry Kissinger. Yeah. We saw their representatives because they're that rich.
Right.
And I wonder if that didn't have the effect of, just like you said, hey, these people should have done their homework. They didn't. I'm not going to put someone in jail for that. So maybe more.
What's the composition of the jury?
You mean man and women?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We've had 3 alternates. Yeah. I believe 1 and 2. So I think of the 12, it's now either 7 men and 5 women, or 8 and 4.
Okay.
So it's more men by a bit.
Because I have found men tend to believe her.
Well, yes.
And women don't believe her at all. I've not yet met a woman who thinks that she's innocent. It's interesting, and it kind of surprises me. Why? I don't know. I just know that she's conning people. Wow.
Right. I mean, I've seen some women who have said, "Hey, I really respect her, and we need her to succeed because we need more women in high places," which is absolutely true.
Right. But that's not about her.
I know. This is a different. This is not a business. This is a trial, and
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they didn't put her on the stand. But then again, I'm no lawyer. For all I know, the defense is sitting there thinking, "We've got this.
Yeah, it's
We
in
don't
the
have
bag."
to." Right. But the prosecution does have one more week, and who knows? We may see more victims. The first time we saw a victim was the woman who was told she was not pregnant when she
Right.
was after a Theranos test. That was very emotional. The court really got quiet, and I don't know why you wouldn't want that feeling more,
All week.
prosecution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, AMD. Wow, the little company that could. Also ran for 30 years after, behind Intel, copied Intel, and now it's now the powerhouse company, and they just cut a deal. They're going to provide chips for Meta.
So the metaverse is going to be powered by
AMD chips.
Yeah, there's got to be remember Intel with the whole Intel Inside?
Intel Inside.
AMD Inside, the metaverse, whatever
Yes.
that means. Yeah.
Yeah, which is infinitely larger. So AMD's shares closed up 10%. It was a pretty big deal.
Give Lisa Su a ton of credit. I mean, this company was, like you said, and also ran for decades. They're a powerhouse now. They're gaining on Intel. They're almost
Yes.
up to there when it comes to market cap, not to mention relevance, and making these big deals and making the chips, which, they're making chips sexy again. And the only company that was doing that, maybe two companies, Qualcomm and Nvidia,
Right.
with the mobile revolution and the driverless car revolution and all
Right.
that stuff. But AMD, which was sort of one of the old school companies, is really strong and coming back big, and give her a lot of credit.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Meta also announced a partner. They're on fire. So they changed their name, and all of a sudden they're moving fast. They just announced they're in a partnership with Microsoft to integrate Workplace with Microsoft Teams. Now, Meta wins on that one, right? They get something out of it. I mean,
I think they both do. I mean, Microsoft.
Well, yeah, but the Workplace is not really
No.
taken off. So good for Microsoft? Or
Yeah.
they're buying a pig in a poke?
Well, remember, the metaverse hasn't really taken off either.
Right.
And so, how excited are we, especially after 18 months of Zoom meetings, about becoming a cartoon avatar that meets, around a fake
God.
cartoon table? So, at some point, the metaverse, I guess, becomes relevant, but it's not there yet. And it's sort of a wait and see attitude. And if you have people like Microsoft on board, at least you have someone like Microsoft on board. They have a
Yeah.
lot of clients, they make a lot of software. I'll believe the whole metaverse thing when I see it.
I think the metaverse thing is targeted at the next generation of kids. They're going to start doing it, in their teens, and they'll assimilate it. And us old timers will have no idea why they want to do it, but they will be doing it full time.
Right.
I think Zuckerberg's 2 steps ahead on this.
He must be, and I think
'Cause I
even
look
further
at it
ahead
and
than
go,
him.
I would never use this stupid thing.
But if you were a video gamer, you'd be into Roblox right now. They've got the metaverse.
Sure.
And right, that's targeting young people, and that's who will grow up either jumping into this or rejecting it.
Right. And we'll know 10 years from now.
Right.
Okay, Sony's cutting PlayStation production because of chip shortages. As long as we're on chip shortage, I heard from our friend, the Valley Marketing chip guru, Rich Goldman. And he says, notice Apple designs their own bespoke chips. And they have a contract with TSMC to deliver those chips. Samsung owns its own foundry. Tesla designs their own bespoke chips, also built by TSMC. And Google designs their own bespoke chips. They have a contract with TSMC. And they're the companies that didn't cancel, and they're not running out of chips. The other folks that did cancel, they're the ones that are hurting right now. So the chip shortage is kind of selective. People that stuck with TSMC are doing fine. That's not getting reported a lot. So this could turn out to be not necessarily a true chip shortage, but a series of bad decisions by a lot of companies. Of course, if China attacks Taiwan, that all changes. Now, TSMC is moving a lot of their fabs to what? Arizona, New Mexico? Yeah. So, but that's going to take years to get those on stream. So we have a period right here where once again we're really vulnerable. But for the moment, at least, certain sectors, certain companies made the right move, and the other ones are paying for it.
Yeah, and everyone thinks such short-term thoughts that it's, okay, this Christmas are we going to have deliveries on time? Why right now do we have so many boats stacked up, outside the port of Los Angeles? I mean, these things will eventually
Work
themselves out, right? But
But here's a question. Newsom has not been, the one guy who's not been getting blamed in all of this for the supply chain problems is Governor Newsom. Yet, as we talked about, we predicted a year ago, when you make the gig economy all but illegal and you force people to not work more than a certain number of hours a week for themselves, truck drivers, why aren't the trucks getting to San Pedro to unload those ships? Because the drivers, if they're wildcatters or independents, don't have enough time in the week, thanks to the anti-gig economy philosophy of the state of California. So, maybe that's another good reason for him to hide for 10 days. Okay. Pop goes inflation. I like that. That was your line. Highest in 30 years. Consumer gas prices. They're estimating that the real inflation may be much higher than is being reported.
yes, we're already seeing it in groceries. We're going to see it when we order these items for holidays, and gas prices are already way, way higher.
And it's hitting the center of the U.S. more than the coast, where all the news media is too.
That's true, but we here in California have extra high gas prices because of all the gas taxes.
Right, we add all the ancillary taxes to it.
Right.
Though I saw on TV the other day on the news, they showed a gas price a block from like the Capitol, right downtown D.C. It was $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
DC is very much like California in a lot of ways.
you bet.
And they're getting hit with this too. And I think this is going to be a countrywide thing where gas prices are going to be super high. Traditionally that drives people to, EVs, hybrid cars, but are there even going to be enough of those because of what we just talked about, the chip situation? We may be at a bit of a logjam. Again, I don't think this lasts for a long, long time.
Well, when the feds are now saying, well, it'll probably last into 2022
Sure.
and beyond. And as long as they're printing enormous amounts of money right now to try to stimulate the economy, that's not going to help inflation. I mean, this could be an endemic problem for 4 or 5 years at this point, which is kind of chilling. Now, the one ray of light, as you mentioned, was it might bring people back to work.
Right.
When things get more expensive, you're not going to be able to sit at home.
Right, because wages will go up, which is what
Right.
some people are waiting for, but also the cost of goods goes up, and
Yeah.
people
Buying
might be
power
surprised
goes
by
down,
that.
yeah.
Right, buying power is down.
So this is going to be a rough Christmas.
It could be for prices, but also for inventory. Are we
Goods,
going to have
yeah.
enough? Right, and that's going to be something to watch very closely. Even with the companies you mentioned, the companies that are cranking out chips, and Apple and Google, and are they going to be able to come out with these phones to satisfy the holiday demand? Tim Cook has already hinted that maybe not.
Maybe not. They're even saying get your Christmas trees early this year because there may be a shortage.
Someone's going to make political hay out of a war on Christmas.
Yeah,
I'll predict
yeah.
that. I'll go
And
way
think
out
of-
on a limb and say.
think of all those pine needles in your living room around about December 24th. Well, we'll see. We're going to be covering this story for a long, long time. Okay, SpaceX, Crew Dragon. This was the 4th trip to the International Space Station, right? By SpaceX. What makes this one different? Is it any more special?
I
They're
think
going
it's
up for
just
6 months.
Yeah, but I think it's also starting to feel automatic.
Yeah.
And boy, when a business can do that and be reliable with the kind of technology that they're using, it's incredible. And it's really giving, you talk about a malaise or whatever, which I think is overblown, but even if there is that feeling out there, this is a cause for optimism.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
it's.
But we can't get complacent.
No,
I
absolutely.
remember talking to the famous guy who wrote Connections and the Day the Universe Changed, James Burke. Uh, Over a drunken dinner, we started talking about a lot of things, and he covered the Challenger explosion for the BBC. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "We got complacent. We started to think of it as the big bus going into space, and so this was just a everyday kind of semi coverage. It was nice. There was a teacher going,
Right.
and all of that, and it just caught us completely by surprise. It was devastating because we assumed the danger had been taken out of the process, and this is still a very dangerous, you know, experience.
Right. And you don't want to get complacent, but it is special that
It
you
is,
don't
yeah,
have to hop on a Russian bus to get to the
right,
space station. You can
exactly.
do it via America. And SpaceX is, a gargantuan unicorn of a company
Yeah.
that just has to toe the line well and is really changing the space program.
Did you know the space shuttle got retired in 2011? It's been 10 years,
Yeah.
and
I remember the tour where it was flying around and everything.
we don't even miss it. You know,
I miss it.
well, I don't know. I like the fact we're going out into space further and
I
further.
agree, yes.
Um, Though I do feel sorry for these astronauts. Every picture you see of this International Space Station is just it's a heap at this point. It's filthy. It springs and leaks. I'm not sure I'd want to spend 6 months up there. Okay, speaking of Elon, he sold $5 billion in Tesla stock, according to filings. He still holds more than 166 million shares, but he sold 3.5 million shares, worth over 3.88 billion plus some other stuff. Um, and they were not scheduled sales. So everyone thought, oh, he listened to the UN, he's gonna turn it into cash and feed the world's hungry. And he's been doing this kind of thing. What do you think?
Right, a Twitter
America.
poll. Can I just cut this off right here and say
Yeah,
he sold stock
yeah,
because he's an extremely rich man and he has to pay some taxes.
right. On the
CEOs
transactions.
do this all the time. Somehow 99.9 of them manage to do it without a whole lot of press coverage.
Right.
But Elon Musk seemingly can't brush his teeth without a whole lot of press coverage.
And he had notified, the right people long before this
Right.
whole UN thing started. But everyone's going to say, "Oh, see, he listens to us."
Right. The Twitter poll was a sham.
Yeah,
He's going to sell stock because he's the wealthiest
yeah.
industrialist and whatever. If he ends up donating a whole lot to fight world hunger or whatever charity he chooses, bless his heart, that's great.
And he'll
Rich
get
people
great
should do
publicity
that.
on that.
Right. But the
But
fact
it's
that
a
an
sham. Your
executive
word
sold
is
some
your
stock.
word is perfect. It was the whole survey and all that. The poll was a sham.
Yes. Move on.
He's awfully good at it.
Yes.
Uh, I got a note from, interestingly, the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and they apparently done a big survey that says that the growing surveillance of employees, which really kicked, I guess, into overdrive during COVID, is having a pretty nasty effect on employee attitudes. Spending on monitoring software increased by 108% uh, last year. And what's happening is the results they're saying the monitoring has a specific purpose. If it has a specific purpose as health and safety, it can reassure staff. But where there is no explicit purpose for the monitoring and information is collected for its own sake, negative attitudes can result, including perceptions of decreased fairness and justice, decreased satisfaction, increased stress, and decline in trust. Uh, will you think employers will dial back on their surveillance of employees now they're coming into the office in theory?
Right. If you're staying at home, don't be surprised where that is where your boss is now keeping track of you because
Yeah.
you're at home. If you have a work phone, please don't be surprised that you're being tracked on that phone by your boss.
Right.
Don't go on social media on the work phone. Heck, don't have a work phone.
Don't have a
If you
work
make
phone.
enough money, cough up a few $100 and buy your own cell phone if you're worried about this. And if you're worried about being surveilled at home on the work laptop, come on. This is what employers do. There is a reason that this surveillance software
But
soared
don't we have
during
a
this
new
last year.
social? We developed a new social contract in the last 2 years, and this is pushing it. I mean, the employer has absolute right to do it. He gave you the laptop,
Right.
and all that. But
what?
you're sitting there looking at this thing, and you're being surveilled. And if you're not, looking at the screen, it's tracking you. I mean, all of this sort of suggests that your employer. I mean, we've had a real breakdown of trust between employees and employers in the last year anyway. And must be really aggravating it.
I don't know. I think that a lot of this is perception, and if you perceive that your boss trusts you,
Right.
that goes a long way towards your performance. And so it's kind of on the boss to have that perception. Hey, I trust you.
Yeah, I was going to say, but
I'm
this
not
is
going to
sort of
monitor your
prima
every
facie
move.
evidence that they don't trust you.
They're buying a lot of this software, yes, but
Yeah.
but that's something that each workplace needs to work on. And again, we're talking about how it's this employees market. Well, bosses need to do a better job of saying we're not just tracking you, we're trusting you a little bit because we want to know the bottom line. If you get more into process than results, you're going to be known as a boss who cares about process instead of results.
And we know that their hold on you is more tenuous than it's been in your lifetime.
Right. So try to bring forth a workplace of trust.
I think it'll be interesting if I could certainly start seeing a website that just looks at which companies surveil more, which less, and you incorporate that in your decision making.
It'll be like a Glassdoor for press perception or something.
Employee surveillance. Okay, before we run out of time, I got to ask you.
Yes.
You were explaining during the deep lockdown what your life was like as a reporter. Basically on the phone or calling in your stories from the truck in the parking lot.
Yes.
At the station. What's it like now? Are you going into the newsroom?
Yeah, for the first time in about 500 days, I went into the newsroom. Still out in the field for the most part.
Yeah.
But in a county, Santa Clara County, San Francisco County, where I work, the vaccine rates are up to 85, 90%.
Yeah.
So there is a little more trust when, a stranger or at least a reporter approaches you with a microphone. But I still do a lot of interviews via Zoom. There's still that, hey, we're going to offer you this to make you more comfortable as opposed to trying to show up in your house because a lot of people are still working from home.
Yeah.
And, I'll be masked, but there is a...
When you're in with the CEO, in the CEO's office, do you both wear masks or do you take off your mask?
Inside, I will wear a mask.
Okay, even during an interview.
Yeah, and I will make the offer to that person. And one thing, I haven't seen this sort of thing. One of the first things that said is, "Oh, I'm vaccinated." Oh, hey, we're all vaccinated here. Whatever, right? People will get that out there,
Right.
which is thoughtful and nice. And I will say, look, if you want to be maskless, I'm this far away from you. I have a mask on. I'm super vaccinated.
Yeah.
You can do that. And the photographer is masked. We're safe.
Does it affect your mic?
No.
Okay.
We did so many live shots and things with masks on.
Right.
And I almost never heard a complaint.
Okay.
I actually have thicker and thinner masks.
Oh,
And
do you really?
The thicker mask will be if I'm around people.
Yeah.
And the thinner mask is if it's just me standing somewhere broadcasting
Doing
on
a
air.
stand-up.
Yeah, and now, unless it's a big crowd, we're not masked. We're all vaccinated.
Right.
And there is a little more trust. I'm not yet going to movies. I haven't dined much indoors. I'm still taking this slowly, but that's a personal choice.
Right.
But as far as the outward public stuff, there seems to be a lot of trust out here, and I appreciate that.
Seems to be growing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.